There's something interesting to be said about the concept of color. Light is both visible and non-visible. You see me because there is light, but what you are seeing is the color, which is the broken light. So the actual light that is illuminating the color is therefore both visible and non-visible because it is broken by the time you see it. The closest you can come to perceiving light as it is would be plastic, like lenses, like this, like clear plastic. That is what light looks like. Or halogen bulbs sort of give off clear light. It's the closest to visible light that you can perceive. Now, where does light come from? This is the interesting part and why I am titling the video Color is Magic, because everything is magic. I'm just starting off the video that I'm doing about magic to do with color. But I'm going to be getting into a wider range of what magic is in this video. Everything that is simply is it. That is as simple as it needs to get. You don't need to look at an entire process that's causing it. It is the entire process that is causing it. And the reason that color is so specific to magic and why I chose to start the video off with color is because light is just light. There may be light sources, but those light sources are just light. We are using magic in a specific way already. That's why we have things like astrology. If you're confused about how light is just light and you're thinking about stars and the sun, that's how we're using the magic. So if we were to reverse the entire process, light would just be light and color would just be color. But when you mix color with light, it breaks the light apart and you can use it as different light sources. Okay, so take my earphones, for example. Okay, the rubber on here is red. Okay, now what's significant about that? Well, there's human implications about it. That's about it. Humans are magic creatures as well. People are all obsessed with the idea of elves and gnomes and sprites and fairies. But humans are magical creatures as well. Or magic, like in and of itself, you know? Like, it's not just dwarves and things like that, right? Like, every part of life is magic in and of itself. Every playing piece, essentially. It's not a playing piece, but it's, you know, there. It keeps it there. If you metaphorize it as a playing piece, it keeps it in place, doing what it does, right? But every piece of the existence we call life is magic. And also, every piece of existence that is part of life also has color. The only possible exception is black, which is supposed to be the absence of color, but it's still magic and it signifies the absence of color, therefore being a sort of color itself. It's the symbol of color. Like, blackness is the symbol of color. That's the best way to put it. If it's the absence of color, it's the symbol of color. Because it is against a backdrop. And the difference between black and white is the contrast. And we use this also in our language. In terms of color, we say it's black and white. You know, it's an obvious difference between the two. You know, it's you know, we use these colors to describe actions and emotions. And, you know, the reason that it's significant that my earphones are red doesn't have to be the reason I bought them. But, you know, it can be things like red is a masculine sort of color, perhaps. Or, you know, red is a dangerous color, you know, like it doesn't have to be masculine, but as an accessorized object, it's sort of hyper masculine. So like that's not why I bought them. Like I bought them more to like signify like kind of just an aesthetic of, you know, the contrast. Like I'm actually another thing that red can be is sporty. Red can be looked at as violence, but I chose the sort of sport or casual look in terms of aesthetic. And aesthetic is magic. It invokes different emotional responses from people. on a somewhat predictive level. You know, a restaurant is a restaurant because that's the aesthetic of the restaurant. If you walked into a restaurant and it looked like somebody's bedroom and it was just a guy with like a coffee pot full of macaroni and cheese on the coffee cooker, you wouldn't think it was a restaurant, right? It's the aesthetic of the restaurant that keeps people coming to the restaurant as a restaurant. It's what makes the restaurant a restaurant. It's what makes people like the restaurant or dislike the restaurant. And then you can determine who will be, well, like you can determine like a class structure based on the combination of colors and aesthetics. Like the aesthetics are based on the color, but there's also the contrast to that aesthetic. You know, if you went to a classy restaurant and you went there in your dirty work clothes, you know, like it would somewhat contrast the aesthetic, right? And not all contrasts to all aesthetics are appealing to the eye, right? And how well trained your eye is to that aesthetic determines how well the aesthetic accepts you. So it's an entirely magical process that fits into a specific framework according to our actual living. You know, living in and of itself is the consistent use of magic day and night. You know, sleep is magic. Waking up is magic. Dreaming is magic. Farming is magic. Even anything. You can think of anything. It's all magic. Fishing is magic. You know, it's also a important distinction between light and dark magic and how each one is used specifically. There are ways to use dark magic that are more light magic, and there are ways to use light magic that are more dark magic. And it has to do with an actual color arrangement. The color arrangement determines the usage of the magic that you are producing. It doesn't necessarily have to be that you used a green wrench instead of a red wrench to hit somebody in the head, that it's dark magic. But, you know, if you hit somebody over the head with a wrench because they were about to hit somebody over the head with a wrench, you know, then motion-wise, like, you could change the outcome right? Like color still comes into play because somebody might see your shadow coming up behind them, right? The person about to hit somebody on the head is coming up from behind them where they cannot see, right? It is the absence of color. It's behind someone's back, right? So, like, that's why it doesn't necessarily matter whether or not it's a wrench. It's an act of darkness, right? Underhanded attempts and behind your back actions are what you would generally be thought of doing if it was dark magic. So, you know, on that level, you know, doing good deeds for people and helping people heal are examples of light magic. You know, and in that case, it doesn't matter about the color, right? But if you're trying to make a statement which does affect the aesthetic of the surrounding, and it does evoke different emotions out of people, then, you know, that's when you start getting into things like gang affiliations, like in terms of like red versus blue, or, you know, sport teams, you know, have different colors that they wear. If you were to go to war, you'd sport different colors. You know, to identify different different signifiers. You know, say chemical compositions, for example, they're generally stored in specifically colored containers according to what chemicals they are. So with that kind of embedded into our internal subconscious, you could use a combination of colors to actually invoke a chemical response in the body. That's sort of what psychedelics are. The magic of cannabis is the shades of green that it is, and the THC, the shades of like orange or yellow that it is, and like they have like hairs on them, like little hairs that kind of come off of them. The trichlomes. They're typically red or orange as well, and they contain like amounts of THC as well. And you know, it's not just because it's THC. It's not just because it's a cannabis leaf. It's also because of the color that you are, you know, having these types of like visuals and stuff like that in your mind. Like, that's why your imagination kind of has like a different definition to it, right? You know, like LSD, tobacco, These things are because of the color also, not just their physical selves. Their physical selves and what we are physically doing with them is so that we can enjoy the color. Color is magic.